Hi, everyone. I am Sam Osterhout. I'm the executive producer here at Lincoln Square. And I'm so glad to see you. And I'm so glad to have Joel Payne. He's a Democratic strategist and a frequent contributor to CBS News. Joel, thanks for joining.
Sam, it's good to be with you.
So good. I was trying to think, when was the last time you were on? We had you maybe with Stewart?
It might have been, yeah. I mean, look, we can judge time in the moment that we're in, but how much pain we're in. No pun intended on my last name. So
Right.
I don't know how bad we felt the last time we talked, but we might feel a little bit worse this time.
We might. I mean, no matter how long ago it was, it feels like probably 1,000 years.
We have aged a lot, as you can see from the
I
salt and
mean,
pepper that I'm
yeah,
growing
you
right
and me
now.
both.
Yeah, yeah.
That reminds me, we should have a show called House of Pain.
We listen. I'm game. It's how I got elected student body president in college. So I
No,
don't
really?
play on my last name. So it's
Oh
it's
my
it's it's
God.
paid dividends for me in many places in life.
That's amazing. I see people are starting to trickle into the studio. I always like to keep track of the chat because it gets a little weird and wild, and our community is really active. So we'll
Well,
keep an
we
eye on
need,
that.
we need community now with everything that's going on. So
It's and to be honest, that's one of the you keep you like me read the news all day every day. You hear from your colleagues and other strategists and Democrats, and it's dark. And I think one of the great things that gives me or has given me a lot of hope and allowed me to kind of keep doing this work has been this community that we built. I when I need to pick me up, I go to the comment section of any post that we do. I read the chat as we do these lives. It's dark, but it's just good to see that there are tens and tens of thousands of people who watch these shows and get some sort of inspiration from it, and so I'm glad to have
yeah,
you
it
be
is.
part of
Look,
that.
just to that point, it is super helpful. As I've said this probably maybe even to you before, but I just think the community piece is so important right now because if not for that, you might think that you're like almost living in an alternate timeline and like what's
Yeah.
going on here isn't up still up and down still down. You need to see the ball go through the hoop to make sure that you are still existing in the
Yep.
same world that you know. So it's helpful to just have people who can affirm you are seeing what they are seeing and you're all experiencing this together.
Yeah, that's right. And I think speaking of seeing things, there are a few things I want to talk about today, and get your take on. And I want to talk about redistricting in Texas, and um, particularly from a Democratic standpoint, and how that could trickle out into the greater politics of the future. I want to talk about Epstein and this kind of thing. But as of right now, Trump has just given this kind of wild and weird press conference. Hegseth is speaking. I don't know if he's still on right now, um, where he is talking about how much of a hellscape Washington, D.C. is, and he's about to send some troops in. So I wanted to get your sense of this. Um, is this a distraction? Is it a real consequential story, or is it a distraction with consequences?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, honestly, right now, because I do think this question of distraction, it kind of undergirds a lot of what Dems are talking about. And look, I'm in the Maryland suburbs, but I've lived in the DC area for about 20 years. I lived in DC for over a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is distracting, but I don't think that Democrats or the opposition to Trump can treat this as like, oh, it's a distraction. So you have to like talk away from it. I think you have to take the conversation where it is. So, for example, when talking about Donald Trump and what he's announced today, the whole, federalizing the DC police and bringing in the National Guard, I think you frame it as priorities. This person was sent with a clear job to do: sustain and grow the economy, make
Mm-hmm.
your life better, make it easier, stop making, reduce the inequity between the wealthy and the well connected and regular people. he's done the exact opposite of that. And this is just the latest example of it, right? He's wasting time and he's wasting power. He has power to make things better for you. But what he's doing is he's abusing that power, and he is federalizing the DC police in a way that's unnecessary, because we know crime is down and that there's a rich tradition of local governance in Washington, DC. He did the same thing in LA. And we know, instead of taking his significant power as president, particularly as a president right now, what the Supreme Court has given him, he could do so much good, but he's choosing not to. So I think that's an effective message. And I also think it does not get you into a place of where you're trying to call balls and strikes on like what's real news and what's fake news. Real news is what people are talking about, in my opinion. And I think that those of us who oppose Donald Trump just have to be a lot more savvy about how we address the political moment and the political news of the moment.
I think that's an interesting point, and I think we're entering a bit of a dangerous zone, because the distraction does become quite consequential. Whereas, before a bad jobs report comes up and he can make a weird statement and everyone talks about the weird statement, or he can say, I'm going to move nuclear submarines near Russia, and it doesn't really mean anything. But in this case, it reeks of desperation, right? He's moving troops in, and that will actually impact people who live in, the residents of DC, to have a militarized city.
So that's a terrible precedent as well, right?
Absolutely.
And it's just, so like, that's a lot for Donald Trump to do, to get you to stop asking about his terrible economy or his tariff policy that's gone awry, or the fact that his big beautiful bill is one of the most unpopular pieces of legislation in modern political history, or the fact that he's covering up for the most noted sexual predator in the history of America. Like, that's a lot to do that, right? But he lives minute by minute, news cycle to news cycle. And I think it's okay to follow the bouncing ball a little bit, as long as you take the ball and walk it back to the place where you want. I don't think it's a problem to play Donald Trump's game. I just wouldn't play it by his rules. Like, I wouldn't have those conversations on his terms.
Right. So the messaging, I mean, I really do think that's effective. This, the idea that whether it was trans athletes or what, whatever issue or problem that he was inventing, to say he's going to solve this problem for you, but is that really your problem? Like, is that really any problem?
Or think about the choices he's making, priorities. And as someone who's worked in, this space for a long time, the most effective messages are setting up a choice and setting up a forced choice for people, and saying, there is someone who has power, who has a choice. He has a choice about what he could do. He could go after wealthy CEOs. He could go after these companies that are making billions and billions and billions on the backs of the American people. But he's not doing it. He's beating up on people who can't help themselves. He's abusing his power. He's taking out frustration and retribution on places and parts of the country that didn't vote for him. He's telling you what to think. He's telling you what you can study. He's telling you who you can love. That's not what you signed up for. And so I think that all wraps up into this larger priorities message. I think Democrats have to get effective about not taking, I'm a baseball fan. You got to swing at some of the pitches.
Yeah.
You don't have to swing at all the pitches, but you got to swing at some of the pitches. You got to swing at some of these pitches that are in the mainstream of what the American people are talking about.
Yeah, you need to swing at the ones that are in the box at minimum. So I wonder about that. I've heard some talk about, a sort of one messaging for 26 and from now on is this idea of affordability. It's a simple word. It's packed with meaning, and it's grounded in people's everyday experience. What are your thoughts on this idea of, I know Democrats talk about kitchen table policy and issues. What do you think about something like affordability, or as a priority for Democrats going forward?
I think affordability can work, but I think you have to frame it up the right way so it's salient. And so it actually sticks with people, right? Like, look, if I went and commissioned a poll and said, hey, should we make housing and what have you, childcare more affordable? Should we, should we lower prices? I mean, of course, everyone would say yes. Now, what's actually going to get people to vote? What are they going to respond to? They're going to respond to these like emotional, cultural connections. And so you have to take the conversation that can be very clinical and very academic, and you have to make it compelling. You have to make it personal. So not just affordability as this flat idea, but affordability connected to right and wrong, connected to priorities, connected to who's fighting for you. And by the way, I think that's what Zoran Mamdani did really well in New York a couple of months ago, right? So like people they're like mystified by like how did this guy who's like identified as a socialist, but it's in New York and he won double digits with Jewish voters, even though he's got these positions on the Middle East that might seem out of step. And it's because he had the conversation with people at the level that they were, and he engaged them the way that they needed to be engaged on the things that mattered to them, and he made it salient for them. He didn't just talk about it as this like flat concept that doesn't actually connect to your life. He made it salient. And so when you say affordability, amen. Democrats should absolutely talk about affordability. You just have to make it salient.
I think Mamdani is such an interesting case, and they asked all of them, where would be your first visit? And of course they all said Israel,
It was like the Bronx.
Like, I'm going to go to the Bronx, which is very salient.
Yes. Yes, it's very salient. And by the way, it's unified. It is, we talk about the horseshoe in politics, right? And you've got people who are on the Bernie wing of it and like the far Trump wing of it. And where do those people meet? They meet where things actually like reach them in their daily. And it's complex, but it's not complex, right? It's complex in that sometimes people say things that they don't actually like. They don't know what they're saying. And I say that respectfully. I'm not saying that judgmentally. It's just like people are communicating a thing that they're not intending to. Like, let me give you some examples. When Trump did the whole thing on like mass deportations now in the campaign, he's got all those signs up. I think what people, and I think we now see after almost 8 months of Donald Trump, people were not literally telling the government, we want you to spend all of our resources and treasure and commission essentially a militia to go after people, particularly those who make our communities better and more connected, and go and pull those people out and put them in concentration camps. That's not what they wanted. All they wanted was a more secure border and maybe people to follow the rules on who can come in and out of the country, which is closer to what Barack Obama's view of immigration was. But because Democrats didn't actually engage on the argument in a real way, they ceded the ground to Trump. But people did not mean the slogan. People meant the affect of making the border more secure and making things more stable in the country in terms of flow of immigration. That's it.
I think, there's a point where as a MAGA Republican, you might think, yes, there's an issue of fairness here within immigration. I've played by the rules. Why are they not playing by the rules and reaping the benefits of all of this? But when you're spending your entire fortune, your entire war chest to solve this problem, there's a real disconnect on the ground. It's hard for even a MAGA right winger to think doing this will solve all of my problems.
Well, also, Sam, these aren't all like transnational gangsters, right? Like,
trust me, I'm
sure there's hardly any, right? I'm sure there's a couple of them, but most of them are like the Lady Carol from Missouri, who like was a part of that community for 30 years, or the guy who they dragged out of his workplace in California, who's got 3 kids who are in the Marines. That's what they're catching, because what they've realized is, to your point, there's not really quite as many people who are the hardened transnational gangsters that Donald Trump ginned it up to be. That's actually not the majority of people who are in this country illegally or who are not in this country with proper documentation. Most people are here looking to make a better life. And yes, we can make we could make a more consistent, a more orderly process to allow those people to vie for citizenship. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean you go and you target people and you turn communities against each other. And I think, by the way, and I'm sure we'll get to this, the redistricting stuff, I actually think like part of the reason why Donald Trump is now trying to do a workaround to figure out how to hold on to his congressional majority is because he knows that this stuff is unpopular and he's going to pay a price for it. He's going to be held accountable electorally next November in 2026, which is why Republicans are trying to rig the rules now.
Well, let's turn to that then. In Texas, get us caught up on what's happening in Texas. I mean, every Monday, I feel like the whole left wing has to sort of review what's happened since Friday.
What has happened in the world? Yeah. And by the way, and Sam, a lot of your folks who are watching might know this, but I work with Move On. I'm the chief communications officer for Move On. Move On actually did a live stream call with a number of Texas representatives, James Tallarico, another representative. We did Beto O'Rourke was also a part of that as well. And so, I can tell you that the grassroots is really getting plugged in to what's going on here.
Yes.
I think the basic update right now is that Greg Abbott and Republicans are, going through the entire arsenal of scare tactics and things that they can do to try to, force these lawmakers to come back to Texas. You've seen Senator John Cornyn, who's trying to save his political career from Ken Paxton, who's, primarying him from the right. So he's trying to get his MAGA bona fides up. So he's calling on the FBI to go out and actually grab these people. Can you imagine the FBI going to grab state legislators to force them back to a state for a vote? Are you kidding me? So anyways, you have that going on. You have Abbott, Cornyn, Trump, others who are now kind of militarizing essentially their response to these lawmakers who are conscientious objectors to what's going on in Texas, which is Greg Abbott and the Texas Republican legislature majority abusing the rules. We all know gerrymandering is a thing, Sam. And listen, we could have like a good faith conversation about whether there should be unilateral disarmament around gerrymandering. And I think there's a reasonable conversation around that. And I think there's a way to do that. The orderly way we figured out how to do it is by decade, attached to the census in as fair of a way as possible, considering the partisan overlays. What Republicans are doing is they are saying, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. We're going to do it mid-decade. We're going to do it off schedule, and we're going to do it responsive to Donald Trump's power grab. And that's wrong. And that's not what the American people, again, that's not what they want. They're going to pay for all this stuff. I actually think they actually might gerrymander themselves into some unintended consequences if they try to do this, because if you look at the shifting dynamics of Texas and the rest of the country, I don't think the gerrymandering is going to work the way that they actually think it's going to work. But in the short run, we've got a burning crisis in our democracy with Republicans just saying, if we can't beat them, if we can't win the argument, we'll just rig the rules.
I think that there's such a cynical and repulsive nature to this, and it is so out in the open. It is that there's no other reason to redistrict at this moment other than to find seats, and they're actually quite open about that.
Also, Sam, there's something funny. I heard Trump talking about this. When I think maybe it was one of the Fox programs last week. He did his little phone call and everything. Oh, it was it was CNBC. He was on CNBC, and he said, "Well, I won Texas. I won more votes in Texas, or I won Texas by more than anyone in history." Well, first off, who cares? But secondly, that's actually not true. I went back and I looked. Mitt Romney, John McCain, George W. Bush all had higher percentages of the vote in Texas than Donald Trump. He had 56%. All of them had 59% and above. Now, even if he was right about that, would that even matter? No. But he has such a hold on this Republican base that he can go say a thing that is factually untrue and that's bad faith, and Republicans don't care. They'll smell his farts all day. And it's it is a crisis that we're dealing with. The crisis of the Republican Party not standing up to Donald Trump has become our crisis outside of the Republican Party.
Well, so I want to talk about then how to deal with this. First, I want to ask, at some point, you got to come out of the Alamo and start shooting, right? Where does this particular case end for Democrats? What is the flashpoint? How does this specific issue resolve in Texas? Do Democrats get what they need, or Republicans push through this redistricting no matter what? And then I want to get onto sort of the broader picture. But
Yeah, sure thing. Well, one, Sam, I think Democrats have to get caught fighting.
yes.
And I think that's what they're doing right now. And I applaud those lawmakers for not taking this line down. Look, I think the reality is these are folks who are all at some point going to have to return to their homes in Texas. And I think it's likely a fait accompli at some point
Right.
that they are going to, the Republicans there in Texas are going to force the outcome that they want to force. And I think it's a shame because actually the special session should be focused on that flood, that historic flood that killed hundreds of people in Texas just 2 months ago. The fact that Greg Abbott would use that as a Trojan horse to sneak in this redistricting, that's disgusting, and that should be disqualifying off the top. But to your question, I don't think Democrats probably have the upper hand in actually winning the battle in Texas. I do think that they can elevate this fight to other states. That's why you've seen Governor Newsom in California. You've seen Kathy Hochul in New York, Governor Hochul. You've seen Governor Pritzker in Illinois talk about we are going to respond. And you have even seen Republicans now talk about expanding what they're doing, the rigging of the rules that they're trying to do, going to other states like Indiana. I think J.D. Vance was just there last week. Again, I actually think Republicans, I'm a big wrestling fan, Sam, they might work themselves into a shoot here in terms of forcing the type of gerrymander that in a cycle or two they may actually not like. And I suppose that they'll go and just cheat again and they'll just go and rig the rules again. They claim that, oh, Democrats have gerrymandered states for so long, so much more effectively than them, that they're just catching up to it. That's nonsense, number one. But number two, there are processes for redistricting that Democrats have found independent commissions in states where they have advantages to try to do this in a way that's somewhat orderly, but Republicans can't be trusted. That's the lesson, by the way,
Right.
moment for me, Sam. Republicans cannot be trusted. They can't be trusted with power. Donald Trump can't be trusted with power, and Republicans can't be trusted to operate within the rules.
I think that there's a message there that the flood, the way the state is being run, the chaos that you see in the streets, even in DC or in LA or wherever it is, the Democrats can say the Republicans have done this to you, and they want to rig the rules so that you have no other choice than to live in this particular world. It's devastating. I mean,
Can I add to that though?
Yeah.
They want to rig the rules, but let's say that they were actually trying to rig the rules to like make your life better, right? Let's say they were trying to rig the rules so that we could expand healthcare for people, or so that people's wages could go up, or so that you could actually level the playing field between the wealthy and between the working class. That's not what they're doing. No. They're rigging the rules so that the well-heeled and the well-connected can continue to get the upper hand on us and that they can win. They're rigging the rules so that people who don't have a fair fight against the wealthy and the powerful continue to not have a fair fight, so that people who might come from a different sexual orientation or might come from a different socioeconomic status or a different place geographically, so they don't have the ability to actually have their voice heard. I mean, Republicans are pretty much saying, we're going to go pass unpopular legislation, we are going to push an unpopular agenda, and we're going to go pick our voters because we're not happy with the accountability that we're facing in 15 months. I don't think I think in the long term, they won't get away with it. But in the short term, unfortunately, they probably do have institutional control to force these wild, unwise changes that they're pushing around the country.
I agree. And I think, the Republicans have, and this may not be exactly right. I need to flesh this one out a little bit, but I'm going to say it anyway, because that's what we do. It seems like the Republicans have traded good governance and good policy for short-term wins for decades. And it's led to a race to the absolute bottom because the Democrats trying to keep up need short-term wins. And it does feel to some degree, Project 2025 was 50 years in the making.
Yeah.
This was a long-term.
They've been
Uh,
trying to gut things like the Department of Education since Reagan, right?
yes, exactly. And here we are. And I think Democrats would like to see Democratic voters particularly would like to see a 50-year plan. Where is it that we can take a loss and not feel like the world has ended?
Yeah, those are
Um,
good questions. Those are good questions for sure. Well, first, I'll just start with this. I think what Republicans are going to face, and whether it's in 26, 28, or beyond, is that now, guess what? They got a different coalition, right? And so
right.
there's as much ballyhooed like shifting of the coalitions. Oh, Republicans have a more working class coalition and a more diverse coalition, etc. That's somewhat true. They
Mhm.
have changed some parts of their political coalition. Well, guess what that means? You have to actually represent those people and their interest, and you have to put them ahead of the wealthy corporatist that you typically go and you stand up and you fight for. And so it's all good during election season when you talk up, we're gonna go and we're gonna fight for the forgotten man, and we're gonna go and level the playing field. And you use all this rhetoric and you frame the Democrats in this certain way, and you shift the coalitions. Well, guess what? Now you have a different coalition that you have to represent.
Right.
And Sam, honestly, the sum total of the first 8 months of Trump 2.0 that I see is that they seem to loathe their voters. Like they
Yeah.
seem to actually not like these people that they were elected to represent. They seem to have a problem with the folks who actually put them in power, the majority makers, right? The podcast guys that supported them, because whether it was anything from Andrew Schultz's push around IVF that he and his wife depended upon, to other people pushing around Epstein, to other people wanting common sense approaches to things like crypto. And he's failed across the board, right? He's
All of
doing
it.
these flashy things and he keeps failing them. And so guess what? Now you have to be accountable to them. To your question related to Dems and the kind of the longer project that they have to undertake, I think that's right. And I think it's embedded in kind of this larger thing about like, do Democrats have the standing and the credibility to be the loyal opposition to Trump? And look, I think that's a real thing that Democrats have to wrestle with right now. I think as unpopular as Donald Trump and Republicans are, I don't think it's like that popularity has transferred directly to Democrats. And I
Mhm.
think that's because it takes a long time to rebuild trust.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to identify messengers who are high trust messengers, who people, when they say something, they believe it. You might like what I say, but you may not believe that I can deliver upon it based on past performance. So they
Right.
may like what people like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris say that they want to deliver. But they've seen, unfortunately, not enough evidence, not consistently enough to suggest they can do it. But guess who they do trust? They trust the AOCs of the world, and they trust people like Mamdani, and they
Mamdani.
trust Jasmine Crockett and Chris Murphy and some of these new breed of Democrats who kind of understand the moment that we're in, and they actually have not in mass disappointed the grassroots like some of these other folks have, who, by the way, I'm not throwing shade at the older generation. I've worked for many of them. I used to work for Hillary Clinton. I used to work
Sure.
for Harry Reid. It is important. The work, the foundational work that they've done is important, but we're in a different moment now. And I think
Yeah.
that the grassroots of the party, before you get to like a big 10, 20, 30-year project, you got to establish trust, and you have to build up enough currency of trust to actually go and put something like that together, and convince people that you can do that. And so that's my view on how Democrats get at that type of long-term power building project.
Yeah, I had a conversation with historian Michael Brennis a couple of weeks ago, and he had a piece in the New Republic about how, the pendulum, the political pendulum of the 20th century, always had a very specific cadence. And Arthur Schlesinger Sr. predicted in 1936 the results of this, 64 election, or the 62 the shift back to liberalism, the shift to conservatism, and so on and so forth, the pendulum. And Michael made the argument that the pendulum hasn't, in 30 or 40 years, hasn't swung back exactly to the left in a way that is satisfying for a lot of Democrats. And I think, um, you know, regardless of Mamdani's policies, connecting with voters provides that sort of, oh yeah, this is what a democratic administration can do, the possibility of that pendulum swinging back to really
I
affect
mean,
people's everyday lives.
Sam, right now, Republicans are acting like they're never going to lose another election again.
Yeah.
They're acting like they've been in power for like 3 generations,
And that there's a huge mandate.
and there's a huge mandate. They are literally acting like a 25-year-old who has their first job in New York was on a cocaine bender. Like they are they are acting as if they have no understanding and no perspective on what the shift of political power,
Yeah.
how quickly the swing of the pendulum goes back and forth. And look, I actually think what you're seeing a lot of is these political parties mirror each other. Like, I think that there's a good case to make that Democrats did not wisely spend their political capital when they had it for at least the first 2 years of Biden's presidency and for part of Barack Obama's presidency. I think that's a fair critique you can offer. I'd say similarly, Republicans have a chance. They had a chance to put together I'm obviously a partisan. I'm obviously a Democrat, but like Republicans actually had a chance to put like a permanent 55-60% majority together
Yep.
coming out of the last election, but they can't help themselves.
Right.
Their base forces them to unpopular things. They want to tell you what to do with your body. They want to tell you they want to tell you who to love. They want to tell you where to live. They want to tell you how to govern yourself. And that doesn't work for this country. And I do think accountability is coming for Republicans. They're going to try everything that they can do. They're going to pull out every trap and every trick to try to avoid that accountability. But ultimately, I just think that I'm a student of politics, and like that just doesn't work. That's not sustainable.
Well, I think that gerrymandering piece as well leads to safe Republican districts where you have to run to the right of the incumbent if you want a primary, and it leads to even worse and more token policies that don't work for anybody but that will work in a primary.
If I was a Republican, I'd be concerned. The Senate's in play.
Yeah.
For real. And it shouldn't be. Like, I'm not saying that because the map looks good for Democrats. I'm saying that because the political winds right now are way shifted against Republicans. And by the way, you can't gerrymander a Senate seat. So you can't gerrymander, whatever's going to happen in Texas when Republicans, if they continue on the rate that they're going, they're going to nominate Ken Paxton. And he's going to be a less desirable general election candidate than John Cornyn. And
Absolutely.
Democrats are going to have anyone from Colin Allred to maybe James Tallarico if he throws his hat in the ring.
Fingers
That's a very
crossed.
competitive seat. I feel pretty good about John Ossoff, running for re-election down in Georgia. I feel really good about Roy Cooper in North Carolina as maybe the most popular politician in that state. Same thing for Sherrod Brown in Ohio if he runs again in Ohio. So
I
all
hope
of a sudden, a combination of Democrats making smart decisions about who to get behind in some of these states, and Republicans not being able to help themselves and not be able to moderate their biggest ambitions just a little bit. That's gonna create a Senate opportunity for Democrats that I don't think. Look, if you asked me that question 4 months ago, I wouldn't have had this answer.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I'm guaranteeing like a Senate win. I think that just means that like it's in play, and this is not a cycle that I'd sit out if I was a Democrat that like felt like I had a chance. It's not a presidential year, and you have Republicans with wind blowing really hard in their face.
Yeah, from your lips to God's ears. I wanted to talk about the looming budget battle coming up this fall, but I want to save that for next time because I've kept you 35 minutes already, and this being the premiere of House of Payne.
I'm happy to come back anytime. Can I give you 30-second appetite wetter?
You can give me as long as you can do.
I
I'm
will
here.
just say this. What happened in the spring was a real fail for Senate Democrats. And I say that as a Senate kid. I think what Democrats are going to have to do is define a fight, pick a thing to fight over, and stick to it. Because I can tell you, as someone who works a lot with the base of the Democratic Party, the grassroots base of the party, they need people who will fight. They want to see that there is fight and that there's people who are smart enough how to pick a fight and actually willing to fight. And whatever it is, whether it's, hey, imagine this, Sam. What if Democrats said we're not going to give you a long-term extension of your terrible budget unless you go and restore some of those Medicaid cuts. What do the politics on that look like?
Right.
Or what if right now you start laying out all the things you're doing to prevent a shutdown? So there's no way the public can think that the shutdown's about you. But that will require Democrats to not fight a battle from a decade or 2 decades ago on government shutdowns. They have to fight a 2025 battle on it, which is different because the rules are different. And I think the public has different expectations about it. So I look forward to, maybe we'll get a chance to have a longer conversation about it at another point. But I think that'll be a really telling fight.
And it sounds like it's going to start a lot sooner than we think.
And let's hope so. And look, Leader Schumer has learned more about politics than I've forgotten. So I'm not claiming any primacy over that. But I would just say I do think Leader Schumer needs to show that he knows how to fight today, right now, not in 2015 or in 2020, but in 2025. He understands what the fight looks like today.
Do you think he's got the juice?
Well, I think he's going to be tested. And I do think that caucus is having some hard conversations right now about whether they have the stomach to be in the fight. You are seeing generational shift. You're seeing some of the older Dems in that caucus start to, naturally graduate out of the body. It breaks my heart in some ways because the Senate is by definition supposed to be more deliberative and like a different body. And that's what I grew up in. But even me as an institutionalist, how I was raised in the Senate, I know you can't, you cannot hold yourself to norms that Republicans have long since forgotten. You just can't do that. You have to engage the way that Republicans are engaging and outgun them. And I think that this will be a real test for Schumer, also for others who hope to be leaders in the future for the party as well.
Well, with that, Joel Payne, I am so glad to have had you today. And I would love to have you back in a week or two to dig deeper into that and whatever other bullshit thing that's happening from
You got it. And we'll brand it the House of Payne.
The House of Payne it is. I love it, guys. Tune in. Keep the faith. All right. Thanks, Joel. And thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next time.